Hello everybody, welcome back to Automation. Today we are working on something I mentioned last time, and that is a little bit of a recreation episode. Last time we did the Automation Test Track Challenge. I have yet to have somebody submit any kind of car that came close to the time, so I assume it really was a challenge. I'm sure somebody out there eventually will beat that time, but apparently it's going to take a little bit of work. I myself have messed around with it a little bit, off and on. I mentioned last episode that I was going to try and do 2 episodes last week. That got nicked by some real race car stuff that I got involved in, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But first off, let's start today's challenge. What I want to do is build both of my in real life cars. I actually just picked up a new daily driver last weekend. That was also part of the reason why I was a little preoccupied. But what I want to start off first is the 240, which was basically what inspired that whole engine recreation series that I did way back when, because I started off with the KA24. Unfortunately, I've lost all of those engines through the updates and having to reinstall the game and whatnot. Somebody actually figured out how to convert the engines to the new version of the game. Unfortunately, I have already deleted them, so I cannot bring them back. They are no more, so we'll have to start from scratch. So let's start a new platform. This is gonna be difficult. There's no body that kind of matches the S13 at the moment, so I'm going to fudge it a little bit. Obviously, the look of the car doesn't really matter. I'm only interested in the performance of it. The material of the chassis is corrosion-resistant steel. The corrosion-resistant part is debatable. The engine placement is obviously front longitudinal. McPherson strut up front. And also what I am doing here is building my 240. I'm not just building a stock 240SX. I'm building my car as I have it sitting right now. In the back, that's a good question. Is it a trailing arm? No, not really. It's more of a double wishbone, even though there's a lower control arm and an upper control arm, but it's a little bit more of a multi-point setup than this is. There's no toe arms, traction bars on this, but this is close enough. Panel material, it's a combination. It's mostly steel bodied. There's also some polymer in it, in the nose and bumper, but for the most part, corrosion resistant steel. And for the weight, we're gonna gain a little bit more weight in doing this, but we can change that later. The body shell, it's a debate if I want to use this one or this one. This is obviously S15, S14 kind of body shape. This is a little bit more S12 kind of body shape, 200SX. But I think this is size-wise and hatch-wise closer to mine, so this is what we're going to roll with. Let's see about maybe rounding off the nose, obviously sloping it back. Don't want it standing up. Fender flares are a little bit extreme for my car. They don't really have that big of a fender flare, but I do need to fit a certain size tire in here. So that may take a little experimentation. This color is probably as close as I'm gonna get. So not gonna do too much with this. I will put some fixtures on it. I may actually even leave the headlights off. We'll see. So let me work on this for a minute, and I'll be back. Alrighty, so like I mentioned, not much focus on making the body look perfect. I did indeed leave the headlights off. We can imagine that there's pop-ups there, and I will continue to bug for pop-up headlights until the end of time. It will probably never happen. But there we go, that's pretty close to an S13 front end. The back, well, let's not talk about the back, huh? It's bad. Alright, tests and stats. We will call this the S13 not so look alike. Save. Always important to save. I am the king of forgetting to do that. Alright, and now we can select it. Make a new model. Longitudinal rear-wheel drive. Choose engine. So now we gotta rebuild our K24, which should be pretty simple, as I've done this before. Let's see, the bore is 89. 89, and the stroke is 96. So once again, the KA, extremely long stroke. When you consider most 4-cylinders, especially of the era. Speaking of which, need to do so. My car is a 1991. However, my engine is a 1995, so I'm going to say that it is 1995. Nothing fancy down here. And hypothetic, and that is it for the bottom end. And we'll keep it quality at 0 for now. We'll adjust that as needed. That is dual overhead cam with 4 valves per cylinder. Then a aluminum head. Compression ratio is 9.5 to 1. And that is true of all dual overhead cam KAs. Cam profile, I'm going to say normal to start with. My engine is a 95, as I mentioned, which means it actually has the less aggressive cam profile of the dual cam engines. I actually kind of prefer it that way. I find that they run a little bit better with the less aggressive cam profile. Some people really prefer the S13 cam profile. Alright, my valve cover is white. Aspiration, naturally aspirated, fuel system injection, multi-point, single, performance intake. I do indeed have performance intake. That is one of the few things allowed for the class that I run my car in. I typically run basically mid-grade here, so 90 octane sounds good. Won't go too terribly rich. And timing, we'll mess with that later. RPM limit, my car does not have one. It literally does not have a rev limiter, which is scary. But I never let it go above 7100. Generally, I never let it go above 6800 unless I am autocrossing. It doesn't do anything past 6800, so it's kind of a waste. Exhaust, I do have a race tubular setup. Not as fancy looking as this, but it is an equal length setup. Except it goes back, obviously. Exhaust, I'm going to go true to my car. It does unfortunately have a 3-inch exhaust system on it. It is the simplest thing to find for a 240 because almost all of them are turbo nowadays. 2.5-inch is ideal. It works perfectly for a KA, but I don't have the $500 to spend on a 2.5-inch system, so my 3-inch system will do. I do not run a catalytic converter on it. It's a race car. Luckily, we don't have sniff touching here. First muffler, none. Actually, that's not true. I do have a straight through, basically, resonator on it. The secondary muffler, I'm going to put none, even though I do have a race series MagnaFlow on there, but it's only 4 inches long, so it hardly even counts as a muffler. Alright, testing. Hopefully I didn't botch anything up there, and we get near 155 horsepower and 160 foot-pounds of torque. I have never had my car dyno tested, but I would say, honestly, to the crank, if it's making 165, I would say that would be a pretty good number for it. Let's see. Sounds about right. Oh, buddy. Well, other than the fact that it exploded, other than the fact that it exploded, it did very well. 163, 162. I think those would be very good numbers and pretty representative of what my engine would be doing at max, max power or when it's running its best. Why it exploded, I don't really know. Let's go into the test mode and see. Listen to that thing boat. That really is what it sounds like. So So I'm guessing connecting rod issues. Piston and connecting rod. Connecting rod goes first. I said cast. Unfortunately, that is the case. So let's see. Maybe we just go up on quality. It's at least staying together now. Let's do a throw test. Quick one. And MTBF, very low. And you can see exactly what I mean about the RPM, or the power at the high RPM. It does nothing. So let's back that down to 6900. That's where Redline would start. Dramatic improvement on MTBF. Still not great. We'll say it's really high quality. Yeah, 37. That's okay. I can't wait for the new MTBF stat to be in because I really feel as though this is a little bit misleading. AKI in 84. So I don't really want to make any more power with it. I don't think that I am, but I could throw a little timing at it. I really wish I could get my car dynoed, but you never really know. So we'll just turn the fuel mix down a little too. And that will bring that up. And there's the 165 I was talking about earlier, so that sounds great. So we will save this as KA24 TE cones. Oops, cones. Save. Okay, moving right along. We're doing pretty well here. No major roadblocks. Choose engine. It fit. That is good. Manual gearbox with a single standard clutch. Unfortunately, we can't really choose options here. And the flywheel weight option is gone. That used to be a thing. That is one thing that my car does have, is a lightweight flywheel. 5-speed ratio. It's geared. It's actually geared to go a little faster than necessary, because I have a limited slip diff, which we cannot choose. That created a lower gear ratio. I would say it's geared to probably do 130, 140. So that looks good. Alright, wheels. I have, I would say, sports compound on there. They're not really semi-slicks. They're a 240 treadwear outfitting. So let's see. Yes, I can indeed get the size tires I have. I have 17s that are 225 front, 235 rear. They are not 35 profile though. Nope, I want to go up. 40 is the most it's going to give me. They are 45 profile, but you can see we're actually clipping into the body in the back. Wow. So let's see. Not really much I can do about that. It's a little too late to pull them out. But like I said, this is more about the testing than it is the looks. Brakes, one piston in the front. I have regular pads on there. The disc size is pretty small. I'm just gonna try and do a visual. They are stock brakes, but they are ABS brakes, so they're a little bit bigger than the normal. I actually have ABS disabled. I don't like it, and it is removed. 1991 ABS systems, not that good. One piston in the back, and very small discs in the back. That looks about right. Maybe a little bigger. So 245, and we'll do 270. Good. Aerodynamics. It's not cloud at all underneath. We only need 128 cooling. That's as much as we'll give it. Doesn't really have any extra brake flow besides these. I do have the wheel wells cut so that these do flow into the wheel wells, but I don't know how much brake cooling that's actually providing. But we'll leave it nice and cool, and we'll say I do have a front lip and a rear spoiler, not a wing but a spoiler, but it's debatable how much downforce those would actually provide. Let's see, it's 2 seats. I'm gonna say basic interior. I have it not gutted. Per class rules, I have to leave the interior mostly stock looking. But there is some stuff missing that is just plain missing. I don't have for the car. And there is some stuff that I have done to help with rate reduction. I'll use this to adjust the weight. No entertainment. I do have power steering, but that is it. Safety we'll do standard. I'll adjust that as needed as well. Alright, now this, I actually know my camera settings. I have, oops, wrong way. I have about 2 degrees in the front, and unfortunately, a little bit more in the back because the car is lower than stock and on stock suspension arms. So it is 2 degrees in the front and about 2.5 in the back, and that is as much camera as I could possibly get out of the back and as much camera as I could possibly put in the front. We're going to say the springs are extremely stiff. I have coilovers on there, and they are a 8K front, 6K rear, so we need to do that appropriately and put the fronts stiffer than the back. It's debatably a little oversprung, but definitely over-dampered. That's the downside to coilovers. They are designed for drifters, not for autocrossers. So, way over-dampered. Sway bar stiffness, I do have, again, the best factory sway bars on the car. I have Hikis sway bars. Hikis was 4-wheel steering. It was originally a 4-wheel steering car, Super Hikis car. Unfortunately, that was all removed way prior to me owning it. But I do still have the sway bars. So, nice stiff sway bars. Ride height will bring it pretty far down. I do not have the car maxed out on lowness. I could go another inch lower, actually. But I don't like to reduce my suspension travel that much, so I don't do it. Okay. Now for the fun part, and the part I've been looking forward to. Let's look over the stats here. 5148, that sounds about right. Weight, 2693, that is actually a little too high. Let me go back to interior, reduce the sound insulation, or reduce the safety. Let's see. 2672. No. What about if I increase quality? Makes it heavier. So we'll reduce quality because it's not quality. 2644. Super light maybe. I haven't. Okay. So I just learned something. Super light is actually more than basic. What sense does that make? Today I learned. Alright, well, that's going to be as close as I'm going to get, I guess. I actually weighed the car. It scaled out at 2550 with me in it. So we are slightly heavier than that. But close enough. Quarter mile, 14.8. That sounds maybe a little bit faster. 0 to 60 in 6.5. That also sounds maybe a little bit faster, but I've never run the car on the drag strip, so not 100% sure. Economy 24.6. That sounds about right when it's running correctly anyway. The injectors like to seize up on these things, so sometimes it's more like 15. Cornering G 1.15. That's pretty good. Alright, enough of that. Let's get to the test track. The Top Gear test track, or sorry, the airfield track. Pull up my list here, and I want to see if it beats anything on the Top Gear test track list on the power lap times. Let's see. Alright, so much different than the last time I was working with this track. We've almost made it to the first turn. Now, I want to look at some of the other stuff, like the yaw rate and stuff like that with this car, because everybody knows S13s are notorious for being drift cars. With my setup, not so much. I typically actually fight understeer with this car. The stagger hurts that. That is something I just can't get away from. down into here. His brakes are not great, so that's going to affect the time a little. I think the stock brakes are fine for what I do. Autocross, for actual track day, they would overheat and brake fade really bad. Flat through there. We get flat through Devmeth. Yep. Trying to build speed. Oh, 5th gear. Just barely needed 5th there. Way down to 3rd. 5,000 is about perfect to pull off the last turn. That's between 4 and 6 is the KA's natural habitat. Alright, let's see. I would like it to be in the 40s. Alright, well, I was gonna make my new car, but I can't yet because it's an MR2. I thought the MR2 or the mid-engine platform was added in the game. I don't see it. New platform, monocoque, steel. Yeah, there's still only front transverse and front longitudinal. Mid longitudinal and transverse have not been added yet. That will be in the next version, I assume. So we'll get there eventually. But yeah, I did just pick up a 1986 AW11 MR2 NA, so it's got the 4AGE in it. Just the regular one, 16 valve. It's neat. It's a very original car. I mean, completely original. So I'm excited to have it. I had an SW20 2nd gen MR2 before, and I think I like this one a little bit more. It's a little bit more basic and go-kart like. So when the next update comes out, maybe we'll revisit this idea and rebuild that one as well. But since we can't do that, how about we do a little bit more testing here with the S13, which uncreatively is named Red. Everybody that knows me knows the car is named Red, so I will never get away from that. But let's take it to the automation test track and give it a run around there too. Alright, while we're watching this, I mentioned earlier that I was a little busy last weekend doing rail race car stuff. I actually had something really cool going on. I worked crew, basically volunteer crew, for a chump car team. Which, if you don't know what chump car is, I'll give you a brief intro to it. Basically, it's meant for low budget racing that you don't need a license to drive and anybody could do it, is essentially the premise of it. It's similar to Lemons or Le Mans, whatever you want to call it, where you have a budget and every car has a value. So every car has to be less than $500 in value. It doesn't mean you have to pay $500 for the car. It just means that the car is valued at a certain amount. For instance, the team I was working for, they have a Lexus SC300, a S13 240SX, and a Z32 300ZX. The Lexus is valued at $400, the 240 is valued at $400. The 300Z is actually no longer eligible for the series. It's considered to be too expensive. That was kind of a rule that was a little controversial. So if your car is too expensive, you get laps added to your score basically when you start. So you'll start 30 laps down if you're in a Z because it's considered too expensive. So it was a ton of fun working with those cars. It was a 14-hour race at Daytona. That's a long time for these cars to do. I mean, they're very well done race cars, but you're talking stock engine, no internals other than stock stuff, stock suspension with just new parts, stock cooling systems. So it was certainly an awesome experience. There were such a diverse group of cars and just different drivers, you know, people that had no experience. I was with my buddy Damon, who is a Spec Miata driver, so he's got a lot of racing experience compared to some people. We actually had Randy Popes driving our car for a little while, which left me a little starstruck for a good portion of time, but it was really cool after a while to see him hop in the car and how much better he was than everybody else and how much more feedback he had. So that was an absolutely incredible weekend. I had intended, let's see our time, 1:57, so slow as expected. Was there any other stats we could look at? Let's look at the detail stats. Tameness is pretty high, that's impressive. But yeah, back to the weekend. It was very, very awesome, and I wanted, the whole time leading up to it, I really wanted to be doing some video there, but I need I need to work on that. I get too nervous about doing any kind of video stuff or blogging, vlogging in person, and I just felt too uncomfortable with it. So I'm actually going to work with some of that stuff kind of away from the public eye and just trying to work on talking to the camera just like, you know, in private, and then start maybe branching out to doing some stuff like that in the future. It's certainly something I would like to get into. But as of now, I don't think I have it in me. It just, I was really busy that weekend. I actually had to work on the cars a lot more than expected, and it just didn't feel like I would be any good at it. So I think that's, I could go for hours on talking about the weekend, but maybe I'll save that for an episode of Racecraft or something like that, where I can just sit here and talk. But here's the stats for the S13 Mr. Red. It's very tame, pretty sporty. And what was its best attribute there? I guess it was the circle test in the 100-time brake distance. All that kind of played a big factor. Its acceleration was a big draw. Chassis stiffness is a draw, that's true. S13s are not stiff chassis. Comfort low, that sounds right. Prestige is low, sort of. They're prestigious amongst some people and not so prestigious amongst others. And safety was a 5-star safety rating car back in the day, but that day is no more. Alright, well, I think that's going to wrap it up. Obviously, I had a little bit more to do this episode, but unfortunately we can't do it without the miniature cars. But I will think of something new to do next time. I think the update's still quite a ways away, so I'll have to dive into my list of ideas for next one. But until then, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.